This podcast brought to you by Hope 1032.
Welcome to the Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore, because life is just better with a book. In this episode, we'll explore the Liane Moriarty novel, The Husband's Secret, as we all wait for 9 Perfect Strangers to be released. We'll look at the Ian McEwan novella on Chesil Beach, which has just been made into a movie starring Saoirse Ronan, plus the new YA novel Out of the Cages, which explores the sex industry in India. That's by Australian author Penny Jaye. But first, let's peek inside The Husband's Secret.
The envelope was grey with a fine layer of dust. The words on the front were written in a scratchy blue ballpoint pen, the handwriting as familiar as her own. She turned it over. It was sealed with a yellowing piece of sticky tape. When was it written? It felt old, like it was written years ago, but there was no way of knowing for sure. She wasn't going to open it. It was absolutely clear that she should not open it. She was the most decisive person she knew, and she'd already decided not to open the letter, so there was nothing more to think about. Although, honestly, if she did open it, what would be the big deal? Any woman would open it like a shot. She listed all her friends and what their responses would be if she were to ring them up right now and ask them what they thought. Miriam Oppenheimer. Yup, open it. Erica Edgecliff. Are you kidding? Open it right this second. Laura Marks. Yes, you should open it, and then you should read it aloud to me. Sarah Sachs. There would be no point in asking Sarah, because she was incapable of making a decision. If Cecilia asked her whether she wanted tea or coffee, she would sit for a full minute, her forehead furrowed as she agonised over the pros and cons of each beverage, before finally saying, "Coffee. No, wait, tea." A decision like this would give her a brain seizure.
Now, Liane Moriarty has sold over 14 million books. Big Little Lies has made her a household name. The world is literally waiting for her new novel, 9 Perfect Strangers, set in a health retreat and due out in September here in Australia. But in the meantime, Natasha, people have already read Big Little Lies and Truly Madly Guilty. What should they read next from Liane Moriarty? Now, my book club is doing What Alice Forgot right now.
I love What Alice Forgot.
Okay,
Great
I'm
book.
not into it yet. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you've got another one. What have you been reading?
I read The Husband's Secret.
Okay, what's this about?
Which is another really popular one of hers. So it's about the same thing all her books are about, really. It's about a few women. It's kind of oriented around this primary school. They revolve around this community, so sort of suburban lives. There's a woman called Cecilia, who's the mother of 3 daughters, and her husband, John Paul, is away on business, and she goes into the attic for something, and she finds a letter that he's written her that's labelled, "To my wife, Cecilia, to be opened only in the event of my death."
Oh, my goodness.
And she's like, oh, well, what should I? So there's kind of the moral dilemma of, should I open it? And then,
I assume she does open it.
Look,
and
she does.
I assume
feel like that's not a spoiler.
Can't tell us what the husband's secret is, right?
Absolutely can't tell you.
No.
I will say that I guessed, more or less what was in it before they opened it. But then there's the kind of the aftermath of what you do with that. So it's got some good suspense going, and there are a couple of other characters whose lives are woven in with her and her husband. So there's a woman called Tess who's living in Melbourne but is kind of from this same community, and her husband declares at the start of the novel that he and her cousin, who's also her best friend, are in love, and she's a bit like, she takes her son and goes to Sydney to stay with her mother. And then there's also an older woman whose daughter was a contemporary of theirs, and she died when she was a teenager. And so this woman is the school secretary, and so their stories all kind of intersect, and we
what kinds of themes sort of come out in this book, without giving too much away, if that's possible? Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure Liane Moriarty is big on themes, or maybe I'm just not big on themes. I feel like what she does really well is show you these authentic, suburban, kind of busy, sometimes frustrating, but also more or less happy lives, these ordinary lives of people, and then gets you beneath the surface of like, okay, what's really going on? And this is maybe ordinary, innocent suburban life, but that can go quite deep and quite dark quite quickly. So, in Big Little Lies, there's quite a strong theme of domestic violence. A lot of people know some things that go on there. This is more kind of murder and illness and, some quite horrible things.
So I feel with Liane Moriarty, because she shows, as you mentioned, that kind of darker side to ordinary life, it sort of can make you question your own life and your own relationships. So did this book have any kind of impact on you in that way?
Look, I'm not a mum in a suburban, it's kind of not my life.
Yeah.
So I find it really interesting and amusing. There's often a lot of humour in her books, but I sort of don't feel implicated in it in a way. And so I think maybe it's I think it's maybe a less stressful read for me than for some people who are like, no, this really is my life.
I felt that way about Big Little Lies.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that Big Little Lies is one of the funniest books I've ever read.
It's so funny.
It's quite dark in some places, but it's also hilarious. The Husband's Secret is equally really well written and really great psychologically, and you care about the characters, and there is some humour in it, but it's not as funny and it's a bit darker somehow.
Okay. All right. So what did you enjoy about it?
I enjoyed the characters. They're likeable, even though they're flawed, as they say, or characters are flawed. Cecilia, the main character, is one of those kind of super organised mums that you can see how lots of people might hate her, but because you're inside her head, you're kind of seeing how she feels about that. And she has this kind of angst about, well, I'm now the organised person and that's how people see me, and it's almost become like this Olympic sport of being an organised mum. And so I think just kind of really nailing playground politics is one of her real specialities, I think, as a writer.
Welcome to my life now, Natasha.
Absolutely. Yeah. You need to read The Husband's Secret.
Okay, next on my list, after I read What Alice Forgot. I can imagine this is going to be another movie.
Yeah, well, it is slated to be a movie, actually. I believe Blake Lively has been cast as Cecilia.
Oh.
We love her, right?
Interesting. Okay, I look forward to that. Thank you, Natasha. Our next book is a novella by Ian McEwan. Now, he's the author of Atonement, which was made into a film with Keira Knightley. I really enjoyed both the movie and the book of that story. But today we're tackling On Chesil Beach, which has also just been made into a movie starring Irish it girl Saoirse Ronan and Billy Howe.
She knew she should have spoken up long ago, as soon as he proposed, long before the visit to the sincere and soft-voiced vicar, and dinners with their respective parents, before the wedding guests were invited, the gift list devised and lodged with a department store, and the marquee and photographer hired, and all the other irreversible arrangements. But what could she have said? What possible terms could she have used when she could not have named the matter to herself? And she loved Edward, not with the hot, moist passion she had read about, but warmly, deeply, sometimes like a daughter, sometimes almost maternally. She loved cuddling him, and having his enormous arm around her shoulders, and being kissed by him, though she disliked his tongue in her mouth and had wordlessly made this clear.
So this is the story of two newlyweds in the 1960s. Tell us about Florence and Edward.
So they're just quite an ordinary couple in some ways, in that way that from the outside they'd be ordinary, from the inside they're, their own really particular people, and their relationship is this really particular relationship. So they're both young, they're kind of early 20s. Edward's a graduate student in history. Florence is a violinist. She's very shy but also quite classy and beautiful and, kind of clumsy outside of her violin playing, but has this real force and beauty in the way that she plays her instrument. And, they're just really in love. They are both virgins. It's their wedding night. It's kind of set up for things to just go really badly. It's the early 60s. They are from conservative backgrounds. They don't know how to talk about sex. They haven't talked about it. And they're feeling quite differently about how this night is going to go down and how they want it to.
All right. Now, this book is, very much set in that specific time and place of the 60s. Did you get a sense of, what life would have been like then and the values that they, I guess, were immersed in at the time?
I think so. I mean, I wasn't around, so I don't know how right he is. But there are even things, little touches.
I'd just like to clarify that I wasn't around
You
either,
weren't,
in
no.
case people were listening to this and
I don't feel
misconception.
we were not around and, can't necessarily judge how accurate his take on the period is. I believe he was around. But, you kind of get a feeling, even for things like the food is different and the way that they think about food is different. He talks early on about how this is still at a time when youth is seen as a bit of a disadvantage and you kind of want to grow up as quickly as possible. And so them getting married is kind of, we're leaving behind youthful things and kind of becoming real people, and just kind of shifts in cultural sensitivities like that. So it's written sort of like the narrator is now and looking back on then. So it's not as though it's kind of pretending to be.
Oh, how interesting.
At the time, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. I found Ian McEwan's writing style, when I read Atonement, it was unlike anything I'd read before, and I found his style quite intense. But just from what I've seen of this, it seems very almost straightforward or sort of simplistically written. What did you think about the writing style?
Look, the writing is very, it has sort of a lulling sense. It is straightforward, and it is kind of a novella. It's quite short. So it's a deceptively easy read, but it is still really intense. So he does this, it's a different kind of suspense to his other novels, which are often like something large scale terrible is maybe going to happen. Whereas this is a lot more it's so interior, and because you see into both of their heads and you can see how he's interpreting things and how she's what's actually going on in her head is really different to what he thinks is going on. And you come to care a lot about these two people and their love
They're heading
succeeding,
for a quiet
but
disaster.
you can just, the intensity of that is kind of almost excruciating as a read. So it's very good, but I don't want to reread it because it was kind of devastating. Without giving away the ending, they may or may not work out, but it's got this knife edge feel throughout the whole of it, that they can make. Whatever happens tonight is going to kind of determine the course of their whole lives, and that's sort of terrifying.
I feel like as a film, it's going to be one of those films that kind of sits in silent moments of tension and anxiety.
I think tension is the word for his writing, and I imagine it will be for the movie as well.
Okay, so what do you think this book is sort of saying, or what did you get out of it in terms of, reflecting on sex and relationships? Because that seems to be what this is really about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be easy to be like, it's about how people didn't used to talk about sex and that's terrible because they can't be open with each other and that puts this real roadblock in the way of their relationship. And that could be kind of really condescending, right, to write that from the perspective 50 years later and being like, now we don't struggle with this. We're so open about sex and love and relationships.
I read reviews that were like that. Yeah,
well, I don't think that is kind of what's going on, because it isn't condescending to them, even though their experience of sex is very different to the way our culture kind of talks about it and the way we see it on TV and so on. You really do sympathise with these characters, but also you can see how this is true of relationships anytime, is that we're really influenced by expectations, and I think nowadays in an age of porn and kind of dealing with the tail end of the rom-com fantasy and what our expectations are for relationships and of each other in relationships, really collides sometimes with, how much can I reveal of myself and how I really feel and what is okay and what is not okay, and those kind of insecurities that come up. So I think even though, they're these really innocent, inexperienced newlyweds, there's that sense of misunderstanding each other and, wanting to defend their own dignity and pride, maybe at the cost of their relationship. Those things are kind of eternal themes. I don't think we're exempt from that because as a culture we're very open about sex.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So you could get hung up on the wrong part of this movie rather than sort of seeing how universal it is, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess if the movie makes us feel like makes us look down on them as, they're such, they're
so naive.
Yeah. If it does that, then I don't think it's done a service to the book.
Okay. And so would you want to see the movie after reading the book?
I think it would depend on my mood, whether I felt like I could handle the tension and the melancholy and, like it is a powerful story, but intense.
Okay, thank you. And now we've got a new segment. I'm quite excited about this, Natasha, where we discuss our reading regrets. Never forget. Never forget regrets. Reading regrets. You never do forget your reading regrets, do
No,
you,
you
Natasha?
don't.
What's your one?
Look, I think often the books that I regret are books that I was really excited about and had high expectations for, and then they turn out not to be what I thought. So mine is P.D. James' Death Comes to Pemberley.
Okay.
Which, like you're always going to read the Jane Austen spin-off, right? Even if it's bad. And I was like, oh, great. This is a crossover of two of my favourite things.
Exactly.
Murder mystery and Jane Austen. So what can go wrong? But actually, I just really didn't enjoy it. It was kind of boring. It was kind of chaotic. I mean, it's a murder mystery set in a time before the detective exists, right? There's kind of, the magistrate trying to investigate and stuff, and maybe that had something to do with it. But I think I just was like, no, this is surely the murder mystery is a formulaic form. This shouldn't be difficult to pull off well, and there's so much goodwill because it's Pemberley and it's Lizzie and it's Darcy and we're up for it. But no.
I saw the TV series, and
the TV series is way better, actually.
I wouldn't say I loved it and I wouldn't rave about it, but I enjoyed it.
I think if you had read the book first, you would have been like, this miniseries is the best thing ever. So I would recommend seeing the BBC miniseries and not reading the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
how about your regret?
Yeah, Natasha, my reading regret is I don't want to be overly critical, but I read this book in my book club, The Keeper of Lost Things by Ruth Hogan. Now, the premise is that basically a guy, he's lost his wife and he goes around collecting all these lost things and keeping them. And when he passes
the keeper
away,
of lost things, sure.
Exactly.
Got it.
He leaves his whole house to his house assistant. She's kind of like a housekeeper, whatever. He leaves his estate to her, and she's had a really sad marriage. And then, of course, she has this romance with the gardener and, inherits all this stuff, and her life just, she has to find the people who lost the things. Look, it's just a bit of a stretch, I guess.
How so?
In that, she just happened to have nothing else going on in her life that she could move into his house, take over all his lost stuff, and had nothing else to do. Do you know what I mean? But so there's some cute things about it, but then it sort of turns into like this ghost story with a ghost. I hope that's not a spoiler, but a ghost sort of inhabiting the house. And again, for me, that was another bridge too far, where I thought this book doesn't know what it wants to be, if it's a romance, if it's a mystery, if it's a suspense, or if it's a ghost story. So
you wanted warning of what it was.
Yeah, look, the other thing I couldn't cope with was that there was just this best friend that appeared randomly about halfway through the book and solved a problem for the main character and then disappeared again. And I really felt like that was an afterthought that was added in to solve a plot hole.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So chaos.
Yeah, so having said that, if you don't mind the whole ghost plot line and you want a kind of a middle-aged romance, you may enjoy this book. It has some sweet elements.
You may not regret it.
Yeah.
Just you did.
That's right. I was a bit picky. Oh, dear. All right. So now, Natasha, we've got my pick, my book, and I'm really excited about this one. It's not what I would normally read, but it is well worth the read. So it's called Out of the Cages by Penny Jaye, and I must just declare that Penny is a friend of mine and that I was involved in the launch of her book. So that's my self-interest.
Disclosure. Yep.
Yeah. But it is a confronting novel about a young girl called Meena who's in Nepal. She's a 12-year-old. She and her 11-year-old friend are actually tricked into being trafficked into India to work in the sex industry in India.
Oh, gosh.
It shows you the very complex chain of events by which this takes place and how these poor girls are hoping to find a good job in India to help their families and then find themselves in this truly awful situation. And it just shows the complexity of how those kind of situations can eventuate. It shows a little bit of their life working in the hotel, and that is They call it a hotel, inverted commas. That is distressing to read. But what this book is really about is about the healing process. When Mina, 4 years later, finds herself rescued in a police raid, she ends up in one of those homes for girls who have been rescued from sex slavery, and the process of healing has to take place. So it is a confronting read, and I definitely would, say 16 and up.
Yeah, okay, because it's a young adult novel, right? And obviously this is kind of a young adult issue. Like, there are young adults and children who are subject to sex trafficking, and, we don't want to pretend that that's not the case. But, like, that's quite an intense topic.
It really is. And I've now...
Is it very graphic?
...moved the book from my home. No, it's not. And it doesn't really even have a sex scene as such, although you're very aware of the things that are happening to these kids. Yeah, and things like, probably one of the most confronting things is that when there's a police raid, it's the youngest kids who are hidden behind a false wall. And so they're kind of trapped in there while the police search for minors. There's definitely some confronting stuff in there. I guess the thing that it stops it being overwhelming is that there is this hope and this healing, and you see that there are people working very hard to free these girls. That said, she does have her little friend she takes with her, and the main character, Mina, is overwhelmed with guilt about the fact that she convinced her other little friend to come with her, and ultimately they are separated, and so she desperately wants to know if her friend is okay or not. And that's a really difficult part of the story to come to terms with.
And I mean, obviously it's a really important issue, and it's important for people to know about it. I feel like sometimes books that are kind of about a cause like that are a bit, propaganda. Like, is it a fully realised novel, or is it kind of a, like, we want you to get behind this cause?
Definitely a fully realised novel, and the characterisation is the book's strength. There are some fantastic female characters, all very different from each other. There's some strong characters, there's some traumatised characters. There are people in all sorts of situations. The friendships between these girls is the redeeming force in the book. They help each other, and every time that Mina gets some assistance, that something that helps her to break out, it is because of a really sacrificial act from a friend. I think that's one of the lovely parts of the novel. If I had a criticism, I would say it's maybe slightly lacking in humour. I would have liked just a little bit of lightness maybe interspersed through it.
Bit too dark.
But you are really alongside Mina on her journey, and that is what makes it deeply moving. I actually had tears streaming down my face when I got to the end of the book, and I would really highly recommend it. You won't be oppressed by it because of that hope there that you know from the beginning that she is going to be rescued. Yeah.
So 16 and up.
16 and up for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called Out of the Cages by Penny Jaye. Well, thanks, Natasha. It's been fun to chat with you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore from the Centre for Public Christianity. The books we've talked about in this episode were Ian McEwan's novella On Chesil Beach, which has just been made into a film, one of Liane Moriarty's backlist, The Husband's Secret, and the new YA release, Out of the Cages by Penny Jaye. You've been listening to the Hope Book Club, because life's just better with a book.
Thanks for listening. Start your day with life words. Subscribe to Hope 1032's free daily email devotional at hope1032.com.au.